Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this very interesting little pocket knife here. This is the Spyderco PPT. This is actually a knife that was chosen for me by my Patreon patrons via the Patrons Pick for the Nick program, where basically my patrons are allowed to, nominate knives and gear for review, and then, they vote on it, and I end up reviewing and carrying whatever they vote on. So that's why this guy's on the channel. So thank you very much, patrons, for your support. And then next thing, let's do a size comparison here. This is not a huge knife, although actually it's a little smaller or a little larger than you might expect. Blade length-wise, it's actually very similar to the Spyderco Delica. In terms of the sharpened, usable edge there, it's only got a little tiny bit of an edge on there, so to speak. An edge on the edge of the Delica. There you go. But size-wise, it is larger than the Delica, generally speaking. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 1 and your Rat number 2 here. It gives you another sense of what's going on here. And then here it is against the Spyderco PM2, which is another really interesting piece, but very different, very different knife. The next thing, this is a sprint runny sort of knife. What I mean by that is that they have actually made the PPT before. This is not a new model so much as a new production of an existing model. This is an older model. It was originally designed by Fred Perrin, Philippe Barotti, and Sasha Thiel, which is why it is the PPT for the Perrin, Barotti, and Thiel. But anyways, there you go. I do think that this is a self-defense focused knife, although they've not said it very explicitly, that it has that sort of a look to it, and I just don't understand it. And so I'm assuming that that's the focus here. And especially given that it is really designed for the reverse grip sort of thing, I think that's what's going on. That's not my world, but I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to review this guy as an everyday carry piece that could presumably be used by somebody with sufficient skill and training as a self-defense piece. Although remember, the very best self-defense knife is a pair of running shoes. But anyways, yeah. And then finally, this guy does come with a lanyard out of the box from Spyderco. That's kind of interesting. It's a little bit different. But there you go. I've gone ahead and removed it because lanyards drive me crazy. But yeah, there you go. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of your Spyderco PPT here. First off, on the good side, this has an interesting set of scales on it. It's sort of got a rocky pattern carbon fiber scale. This is not G10, but this is actually a carbon fiber. You can see here that when they do that rocking pattern, it puts kind of a very interesting look to it, which I appreciate. I think it's kind of neat looking, and it offers great texturing. This is really well textured. This is not going anywhere in your hand. Between these little finger stick-up guys, finger grooves, I believe is the technical term, the jimping on the clip itself, which is interesting. I mean, this is seriously, absolutely going to stay in your hand. I appreciate that very much, and in pretty much any grip you'd like to carry this guy in, it is absolutely wedged in the hand, and that's pretty excellent. So, great Vaseline factory knife. However, one thing I do want to highlight, and this is something that always brings me joy, but if I lift this clip up a little bit, you can see, I hope, that underneath the clip, there is an island where there is no texturing. And so they've managed to make a knife that is heavily textured but still goes into and out of the pocket beautifully because they very carefully textured textured this so that the clip is on a smooth area. That's a brilliant thing. This is why Spyderco is conscientious. I'm sorry, this is evidence that Spyderco is conscientious with those kinds of things. You see it on all of their stuff, and I always appreciate it, and I hope that more makers emulate that approach. So that's good. Next thing, this has a titanium deep carry clip, and it's an interesting clip. It is very deep carry by virtue of having the screwby on the top there. It is not reversible, though, in the way that a lot of these kinds of clips are. The thing is, it wouldn't reverse well, given that it has a little bit of curvature to it, and this is not a lefty-friendly knife anyways. But nonetheless, it's a nice clip, and it does a very nice job with deep carry. The deepness of the carry, though, is likely why this lanyard was included there, because I can see this being a little tricky to get out of the pocket. The jimping here and the texturing here on the clip make that easier, but it's still absolutely a thing. It is beautifully fit and finished, so to speak. The Taichung factory, this is made in the Spyderco Taichung, Taiwan factory, and the Taichung factory is one of the best, if not the best factory from Spyderco in terms of fit and finish. Golden can be very comparable in a lot of ways, but Taichung does incredible work. The centering on this guy is absolute perfection. The action on it is very smooth. As you saw during the disassembly, they took active steps to ensure that. This is just really well done, and I love Taichung's work. They do great stuff. And speaking of that action, it is very, very smooth. Right now, I've got it running, as you saw from the disassembly, on a mix of some 85 weight nano oil as well as a little bit of nano grease. It'll run well on oil too, and as it wears in, it'll probably just get better and better. But this is a very nice, very smooth action that I appreciate very much. And so all of those things, to me at least, are the good. It is a beautifully well-made knife with a very, very smooth action. It is beautifully textured, which means it's great in the Vaseline factory. It has a very nice deep carry clip here, and then this rocked carbon fiber thing looks pretty cool. I gotta give him that every day of the week. To me, what's great about this knife is this blade. This blade is really neat for a couple of reasons. To start with, it's a very nice utility sort of cutting shape. I like this sort of a warny with a little bit of belly thing going on. It works very well, and it's also super thin behind the edge. This guy slices like crazy. Every day that I carried this guy and I got a chance to use it, it was just like, oh man, I like this. This is a great blade for actually doing cutting work. An S90V is the steel on this guy, and S90V is a great steel. Absolutely 100%. Maybe a little bit on the chippier side, so it's not a steel that takes a lot of abuse very easily, although, again, I haven't tested it hard, so maybe they're doing better on that than usual. But nonetheless, S90V is a great, great steel. It has a nice blade shape. It's got a nice little swedge, even the jimping on the top of the blade, so if you're really up there, choked up, it still works pretty well. I love this freaking blade. This blade is absolutely great, and I kind of wish I could get this exact blade in another handle, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's the great to me, is that this has just an absolutely great blade. On the bad side, first off, I do have to highlight that there is relatively little edge on this guy for a whole bunch of both blade and body. The actual usable cutting edge on this guy comes in at like 2.75 inches here. The measurable blade length on this guy is around 3.2 inches. So that's going to put it over the 3-inch line in a lot of places. And the overall length of the knife here is actually longer than I can measure. So the closed length of this knife is around 4.16 inches there. So you're getting 2.5 inches of blade and like 4 inches of knife. That's not a big deal, but it is certainly a deal. Next thing, there are sharp edges everywhere. This is a Taichung Spyderco, and unfortunately, when they're not stonewashed, Taichung has a tendency to have these really sharp corners on things. The sharp edges of the jimping, sharp edges elsewhere. This is something they need to work on knocking down a little bit, or they just need to stonewash things more. But that is definitely a sign that this is a Taichung knife. Next thing, the back spacer on this guy is a full chunk of titanium, but the thing is, oddly enough, it doesn't really seem to fit all that well. There are little gaps not gaps that you can see through, but you can see here that the back spacer is raised up above the surface of the knife. And this is something that could very easily look like one single piece of metal if it were done really, really perfectly. But as it is, it kind of looks a little bit like, well, they didn't quite get that one down. And honestly, that was a little surprising. I'm being picky here 100%. This has no functional issue in the knife whatsoever, but it is something that was a little bit surprising coming out of Taichung. Next thing, the full metal backspacer on this guy honestly feels excessive to me. I get that they need some element of it to be metal in order for the pocket clip to screw into it, but unfortunately the balance on this knife is not really very good. We'll talk about that later, but having that full metal in there seems a little weird. I almost would have preferred to see some metal, at least with cutouts or something like that, to reduce some of the weight in the back and just overall on this guy. Next thing, my understanding of this, and again, I may be completely wrong, and all of the ninjas out there in the world might be looking at me going, Nick, you're crazy. The thing is, this seems to be something that is marketed, for the reverse grippy tactical side, but it's actually not all that fast to open. In fact, there's really only one way to open this guy, and that's by flicking the thumb out there. It's not like you can do the Spidey flick thing. I mean, maybe if you've got really small fingers, you can get it in there, but because the lock bar is really blocking the hole on the left side here, which, by the way, sorry, lefties, that's not going to work for you. But nonetheless, there's not really, it's not like waved open. It seems a little weird in that domain. But, okay, not a huge deal. One thing that is a big deal for me, although I think this is more specific to me than for most, is the ergonomics on this guy. The ergos just don't work for me in a conventional saber or hammer grip. And in fact, I mentioned this on Instagram, and I got two very different responses. Some people saying, oh no, the ergos are great, I love the ergos, and some people saying, yeah, I can't do it for me. either. I mean, for me, practically speaking, this knife is just not great because this little finger groove is stabbing into my fingers in 2 different places. Tip of the clip here. It works very well, by the way, in a reverse grip. So if I'm this isn't going to work for utility cutting unless you've got some really weird utilities in your life. But like I said, some folks do like it. So although it is a complete miss for me, ergonomically speaking, by the way, this little ramp here, it's nice. It's a complete miss for me ergonomically, but for some people it isn't. So this might be one that you want to handle before you buy. Although that can be very difficult sometimes. And so, to me, all of that is the bad, is that the ergos just don't really work for me in a conventional hammer or saber grip on this guy. Even though it is good in a reverse grip, it is relatively slow to open, which is weird given that this seems to have a lot of the trappings of being a little more tactical. The backspacer doesn't fit so well, and the full metal backspace is not helping the weight on this guy at all. It has very sharp edges, and it has relatively little edge for a whole bunch of blade. On the ugly side, unfortunately, there are 2 ugly issues. To start with, the balance on this knife is very, very weird. Because it has this full backspacer, it balances all the way back here, as opposed to a lot of knives which will balance much closer to where your hand belongs. And so this feels, especially when you're choked up like this, which is kind of my preferred grip, it really does feel bottom heavy. It doesn't seem to work well for me. The balance is much better in a reverse grip, which again leads me to think that this is kind of they're planning on it being used in this domain more than anything. But still, in an everyday carry-friendly sort of grip, the balance doesn't work for me, and it is also very, very heavy. This is a weird knife in that it is a liner lock, kind of, but really it's a mix of a liner lock and an integral lock. It's got lock bar relief, etc. I can't figure out if it's a liner lock that's extra durable, which, let's be real here, a liner lock is usually pretty durable anyways, or an integral lock that's wearing a pair of carbon fiber pants. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it's heavy. We put this guy down here. We're looking at 4.73 ounces here, coming off of 2.75 inches of blade length. As a result, this guy just feels a lot heavier than I feel like I expected, than I needed it to be. And they have even done some skeletonization. They've done some drilling out of holes in this guy to try and knock that weight down. But holy crap, is this thing heavy. And so I feel like this is just really weirdly balanced and really heavy, all for this idea of having this kind of hybrid, integral, otherwise thing. Just, I don't quite get it. And so ultimately, those 2 things are ugly to me. Is that it's weirdly heavy and the balance just doesn't work for me in every grip but the one I just would never really use. So there you go. That's the ugly. Then final conclusion, I'm a little bit torn here because it's nicely made, absolutely 100%. It is a beautifully finished knife. Taichung has done very good work, and the materials are great. It's nice carbon fiber, it's titanium, it's S90V, and it cuts really well, and the action is very smooth. At a lot of levels, I like what they're doing here, and this is a quality knife. I cannot, by no means am I disagreeing with that assertion. But the thing is, this handle does absolutely nothing for me. To me, the ergonomics, it's like a sack full of hedgehogs for me. I can't freaking do it. It is absolutely heavy as heck. The balance just isn't right in the grips that I tend to use, and honestly, this handle just doesn't seem to make much sense. Maybe I would like this much more in a martial context. Maybe if I'm the kind of person who's thinking about this in terms of, actually using this for self-defense or whatever, then this would make sense to me. But for me, this is honestly a really great blade in a handle that makes 0 sense to me. This handle, I just don't get. And for everyday carry, honestly, I feel like I would not ever carry this guy given that the Delica exists, which has a very, very similar blade. Given the steel is far inferior, the VG10 versus S90V here. And so, but very... the blade's shapes, the blade cutting geometry, the blades are similar in a lot of meaningful ways here. This is half the price, it's half the weight, it's just, and frankly, it's way smaller. The Delica just carries a lot better. And so ultimately for me, I don't know why I would end up buying this guy here when I could buy this guy here in a very, very nice dinner. And particularly when you can get one of these guys in an upgraded steel, it's absolutely compelling. So ultimately, although I can certainly respect it, and it is certainly a well-made, high-quality knife, it's not something I'm particularly loving, and frankly, it's not something I remotely understand. And so, you might love it. You might be looking at this and going, yeah, I love the reverse grip. That's how I open all of my, apples in boxes. And so maybe this will work for you, but absolutely the PPT is not for me. So anyways, I hope you found this interesting and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.